Arrogant judge laughs at crying elderly black man in court, but has no idea who's about to walk in. The courtroom was full. Every seat taken. Some people stood in the back just to watch. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, but in the middle of it all, one man stood quietly, holding a briefcase that looked older than most things in the room. His name was Elijah Carter. He was 78 years old, wearing a clean but faded suit that didn't quite fit. His hands shook, not from fear, but from age and the weight of the papers he carried. Judge Harland sat high above, cold eyes staring down. "You think your tears will change the law?" he asked, voice sharp. Elijah didn't answer. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of worn documents. Land deeds, letters, and photographs from generations past. "This land belonged to my family," Elijah said softly. "Since 1867, the judge leaned back, almost amused. "Mr. Carter, in this courtroom, it's not about promises made after the Civil War. It's about permits and paperwork. And your paperwork isn't enough." A few people in the gallery chuckled. One even laughed out loud. Elijah blinked hard to keep the tears in. "But that land is our home," he said. "We have a cemetery on it. My wife is buried there." Judge Harland waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. "Cemeteries can be moved. Your claim has no merit. I rule in favor of Brightwell development." His gavel came down. One sharp sound. Just like that, Elijah's world collapsed. The bailiff stepped forward. "Time to go, sir," he said gently. Elijah held his briefcase tighter and turned to leave, his eyes wet, but his back straight. Then it happened. The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. A woman in a sharp black suit walked in, head high, eyes locked on the judge. She carried a sealed file. "I'm filing an emergency motion," she said, loud and clear. The courtroom froze. The judge's smile vanished, and Elijah Carter turned around, not knowing the woman walking toward him would change everything. Her name was Amara Langston, and she wasn't just another lawyer. She was a civil rights attorney who had spent years chasing justice in courtrooms like this one. But today was different. Today, it was personal. As she handed the file to the court clerk, whispers filled the room. Even the Brightwell lawyers looked nervous. "The evidence in this file," Amara said calmly, "proves that this land was stolen, not only from Mr. Carter, but from his father before him. And the man who helped make that happen was sitting on this very bench." Judge Harland stood, but his voice had lost its edge. "This is irregular, highly inappropriate. Amara." "Cut in? So was your ruling. And now, we're going to fix it." Elijah just stood there, stunned. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she came from, but something about her felt familiar, strong, safe. The reporters had stopped typing and started recording. Cameras turned toward Amara, capturing every word. "We are asking for a stay on this ruling," she said, "because new evidence has surfaced, evidence that was hidden, silenced, and suppressed." The courtroom was no longer laughing. The judge hesitated, then finally said, "I'll review the motion in chambers." But it was clear to everyone. His control was slipping. As the bailiff led Elijah back to his bench, he looked at Amara. "Thank you," he whispered. She gave him a small nod. "We're not done yet." Outside the courtroom, the news spread fast. Protesters had gathered earlier that day, holding signs, shouting for justice. Now they had a reason to believe change was possible. That maybe, just maybe, truth would win after all. Inside the courthouse, Elijah sat with his hands on his lap, still gripping that briefcase. Inside were his family's memories, his proof. And now, someone was finally willing to look, as Amara prepared for the next steps. She glanced back at Elijah. He looked so tired, so broken. But she also saw something else. Hope. And that was enough to keep going. Because this wasn't just about land. It was about history. It was about dignity. It was about righting a wrong that had gone on too long. And it was only the beginning. The courthouse was still buzzing. Inside, the walls felt tighter than before. Reporters had rushed out to send breaking updates. Outside, protesters held signs higher. Inside, Elijah Carter sat quietly on the wooden bench, staring at his hands. Rough and wrinkled, shaped by decades of work and time. He had worked the land for as long as he could remember. Not just plowing fields or mending fences, but walking, every inch of it, knowing where the creek changed course in spring, knowing which oak tree gave the best shade in July. His whole life had been rooted in that soil, but it hadn't started with him. His great-grandfather, Moses, had been born enslaved. After freedom came, he was one of the lucky few who received a land grant under the Southern Homestead Act in 1867. Just 3 acres, but it was something. A beginning. That land had passed down through every generation. It was never sold, never abandoned. It became more than property. It became family. Elijah remembered even now how his father used to walk with him to the edge of the field and say, "This dirt right here, it knows our names." When his father passed, Elijah buried him beneath the oldest oak on the land. Years later, he buried his wife Ruby beside that same tree. They had been married for 50 years. She had loved that land as much as he did. After Ruby passed, the house grew quiet. Their children had moved away, chasing jobs in cities where land didn't matter the same way. Elijah stayed. He took care of the graves, trimmed the grass, and made sure the soil was always turned in the garden. Some days he swore he could still hear Ruby singing in the kitchen. Then the letters started coming. From Brightwell Development. At first they were polite, offering to buy the land at market value. Then came the pressure. Code violations. Tax. Audits. Then finally, a court order. That's when Elijah realized it wasn't just business. It was a plan. A quiet push to erase him and everything his family had built. And now here he was, back in court, trying to defend land that had already cost his father his life. He hadn't expected anyone to stand with him, especially not a woman like Amara Langston. He didn't know her, not really. But when she had walked into that courtroom with confidence in her step and fire in her voice, something about her had felt familiar. He couldn't quite place it, but it stirred something deep inside. As he sat there waiting, his mind wandered to something else, something he hadn't thought about in years. A fire. He was 12 years old. The neighbor's house was burning, and he heard someone scream that a child was still inside. Before anyone could stop him, Elijah had run in. Smoke, heat, crackling wood. He found her upstairs, trapped under part of the ceiling. He pulled her out. Didn't even think twice. He never saw her again. Now, decades later, that memory floated to the surface like a message. Could it be? No. That wasn't possible. Before he could think further, someone touched his shoulder gently. It was Amara. "We have a hearing in the morning," she said. "The judge will be forced to consider new evidence." Elijah nodded slowly. "You really believe we can win this?" She looked him in the eyes. "I believe we have something stronger than money or connections. We have the truth." Elijah looked down at his briefcase again. Inside it were papers no one had wanted to look at. His great-grandfather's deed, a letter from the Freedmen's Bureau, family photos, birth records. All proof that his family had been there, living, working, dying, loving on that land for over a century. "They laughed at me," Elijah said softly. "Like I was just some old man with stories. But that land, it's all I have left of them." Amara nodded. "They laughed because they're used to people walking away. But we're not walking away, are we?" "No," she said. We're walking back in. That night, Elijah didn't sleep much. He sat on his porch, listening to the wind. It carried with it the scent of summer and soil, the memory of children's laughter, of Ruby's Sunday biscuits, of his father's stories. He closed his eyes and let it wrap around him. He was not just fighting for land. He was fighting for a name, for a story, for the right to say, "We were here. We mattered." And in the morning, they'd go back to court, not just with documents, but with something far more powerful: legacy. That night, Amara couldn't sleep either. She sat at her desk in a small apartment just a few blocks from the courthouse, the sealed file from Elijah's case lying open in front of her. Pages of evidence, handwritten deeds, birth certificates, faded photographs, each one telling a piece of a story too many had ignored. She had seen hundreds of cases in her years as a civil rights attorney. But this one felt different, deeper. She stared at Elijah Carter's name on the original deed, and something tugged at the edge of her memory. Something old, something buried. The last time she had heard that name, she had been just a child. Back then, her world was smoke and fear. She remembered a night long ago, the flames, the pounding on the glass, the way her chest burned from coughing. And then, out of nowhere, a young man, burst into her bedroom through the thick smoke. He didn't say much, just, "I've got you." He lifted her from the floor, covered her face with his coat, and carried her through the fire. She never got his name. All she knew was that he saved her life. After the fire, her family moved away. Fast. Her mother refused to talk about what had happened. Her father left. For years, the memory had faded to pieces, flashes of light and heat, a kind voice in the dark, the smell of burned wood. She had locked it away. It wasn't until this case came across her desk, until she saw Elijah Carter's name, that something inside her clicked. She pulled out an old folder from her personal files. Inside, a newspaper clipping from 30 years ago. Boy saves girl. From fire in rural Georgia. No photo, just a small article. The name, Elijah Carter, age 12. Her eyes welled up. That boy had been him, Elijah Carter, the same man who had stood in court, alone, holding nothing but a briefcase full of memories. The same man who now faced losing everything his family had ever built. And she realized something else that night. She owed him her life. That was why she walked into that courtroom the way she did, back straight, voice steady, eyes burning with truth. Not just as a lawyer fighting injustice, but as a life once saved, coming full circle to return the favor. The next morning, she stood outside the courthouse, watching the sun rise over Jefferson County. She could hear the crowd gathering. Again, protesters, supporters, news vans. The city was waking up to a battle they didn't expect to see, a battle for something no one could put a price on. Inside, Elijah sat quietly on the same bench, his briefcase on his lap. He looked up when she walked in. Amara nodded to him. "Elijah," she said for the first time softly. "Yes?" She sat beside him. "I think I know you from a long time ago." He tilted his head, curious. "How would that be?" She reached into her bag and pulled out the newspaper clipping, yellowed with time. "You saved me, from the fire. I was the little girl in the window." Elijah stared at the paper, then at her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, he whispered, "I remember. You were so small. You held onto my neck and wouldn't let go." Amara smiled gently. "I never did. Not really." They sat in silence, both lost in thoughts. Then Elijah said, "And now you're saving me." She looked him in the eyes. "Maybe we're saving each other." In the courtroom that morning, Amara took charge. She presented the emergency motion. with calm force. Her voice didn't shake. Her evidence was solid. The courtroom, which had laughed just days before, now sat silent. Judge Harland, for the first time in his long career, looked uneasy. "This motion is based on suppressed records," Amara said. "Documents that show forged signatures, missing filings, and backroom deals between Brightwell Development and courthouse staff." She placed a thick packet on the clerk's desk. "And I have reason to believe this court has been compromised by conflict of interest." Judge Harland narrowed his eyes. "You're out of line." "I'm out of patience," she replied. "We will not let history repeat itself under your watch." Gasps echoed from the gallery. Even the Brightwell attorneys looked unsettled. Harland tried to call for order, but the room no longer moved on his command. Outside, the story was spreading. Reporters fed updates to networks across the country. Social media lit up with hashtags like "Chars Stand with Elijah" and "Justice for the Land." Local activists began organizing. A legal aid group from Atlanta offered to help. This was no longer just a land dispute. This was a reckoning, and Elijah Carter, quiet as he was, had become a symbol of something much larger than 3 acres of dirt. As the day ended, Amara walked, with Elijah down the courthouse steps. The crowd cheered as they passed, but Elijah's face stayed calm. "This ain't over yet," he said. "No," Amara agreed, "but we're not alone anymore." And somewhere deep inside them both, something settled. A circle had closed, a debt repaid, a fire that once destroyed now lit the path forward. The morning air smelled like rain. Elijah stood just outside the Jefferson County Courthouse, briefcase in hand, watching storm clouds roll across the sky. Protesters were gathering again, signs, chants, energy rising. But Elijah stayed still, feeling the weight of time pressing down on his shoulders. He had just finished another long hearing, motions, arguments, delays, nothing final, nothing decided, just more waiting. And waiting was the hardest part. "You holding up?" Amara asked gently as she walked out behind him. "I'm still standing," he said, offering her a tired smile. They began walking down the courthouse steps when a black car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. A man stepped out, early 30s, clean-cut, expensive shoes, laptop bag over one shoulder. "Elijah Carter?" the man asked. Elijah squinted at him. "Yes?" "It's me, Grandpa." Isaiah. The briefcase nearly slipped from Elijah's hand. He hadn't seen his grandson in 3 years. The last time they spoke, it was at Ruby's funeral. Isaiah had come late and left early. No explanation, no promise to return. Elijah had stopped hoping he would. Now, here he was. Face older, eyes softer, dressed like a city man, but there was something familiar behind his voice. The way he said, "Grandpa," still carried the same warmth. Isaiah stepped forward and hugged him without asking. Elijah hesitated, then returned it. "I'm sorry. It took me so long," Isaiah said. Elijah looked him over. "You grew up." "I had to, but I never forgot." Amara watched quietly, sensing the moment wasn't hers to touch. Later, the 3 of them sat in a quiet diner on the edge of town. A plate of untouched biscuits sat between them. Isaiah opened his laptop and pulled up a file. "I work in data security," he explained. "Corporate stuff. But when I saw you on the news, I started digging into Brightwell Development." He turned the screen toward them. "What I found, it's big." A series of names appeared. Transactions, shell companies, account numbers. It was all there in plain sight. "Judge Harland is one of the shareholders in Brightwell," Isaiah said. "He owns a piece of the company that's trying to take your land." Elijah stared at the screen. "He sat on your case," Isaiah continued, "while secretly standing to profit from the outcome. That's a conflict of interest, and it's illegal." Elijah looked at Amara, whose lips were tight with focus. That explains why they never let me speak, Elijah said quietly. They already knew how it would end, Isaiah nodded. They planned it that way. But that wasn't all. Isaiah pulled up another folder. There's a pattern. Over 20 other families in this county lost their land in similar cases. Same judge, same company. And all of them were black families, Amara said, already knowing the answer. Isaiah nodded again. Elijah felt a strange mixture of sadness and fire in his chest. So it's not just about me. It never was, Amara replied. You were just the first one they couldn't erase quietly. Isaiah scrolled further. I also found this. It was a scanned image of a court record from 1987. A case called Carter versus Harland. That was my father, Elijah whispered. Harold Carter. He filed suit after they tried to take our land the first time. But he lost. Amara leaned forward. The judge back then was William Harland, this judge's father. Elijah's eyes widened. 3 generations of my family, and 3 generations of theirs. It's more than a bad judge, Amara said. It's a system, a dynasty. Elijah stared out the window. The rain had started falling, soft at first, then harder. It tapped on the glass, like a memory knocking on his door. He died thinking he failed us, Elijah said about his father. But maybe this is his justice, too. That evening, Amara returned to her office. As she sorted through the documents Isaiah had given her, her assistant walked in. There's someone here asking for you, he said. Says it's urgent. A woman stepped inside, about 40, sharply dressed but nervous. She looked around before speaking. I need to stay anonymous, she said. But I know where Judge Harland keeps his real records. There's a safe in his private study. Amara narrowed her eyes. Who are you? I'm someone who knows the house, the woman said. And I've seen what he hides. There are documents, deeds, payoffs, maybe even the truth about the 1987 case. And why tell me? The woman hesitated. Because I'm tired of watching innocent people lose everything while the powerful hide behind the law. Then she left. Amara stood there for a long time, heart racing. If what that woman said was true, they were closer to the truth than they had ever been. But they were also in real danger now. Because when powerful men feel the ground shaking under them, they fight back. And the ground under Judge Harland was starting to crumble. The rain hadn't let up. It fell in steady sheets as Amara Langston stood by her office window, arms crossed, watching cars pass through puddles. She hadn't moved, for minutes. Her mind replayed the stranger's words from the night before. The vault. It's all there. Everything he's been hiding. If it was true, the judge's safe could hold the proof that generations of families, including Elijah's, had been cheated out of their land by design. Amara had seen corrupt cases before, but never one so old, so personal, so wide, and never one this dangerous. She had barely slept when her phone buzzed. Micah Reed, an investigative journalist from Atlanta she had worked with in past cases, had left a message. Call me back. Something's off. I think I found a pattern you'll want to see. She did, Micah answered on the first ring. His voice was low. I think you're being watched. Amara's breath caught. What are you talking about? I was at the courthouse checking property records. 20 minutes later, I got a call from a number I don't know. The guy asked what I was looking for in Elijah Carter's case. Then the line went dead. Could it be coincidence? No. And listen, Micah added. I dug into Brightwell Development. It's more than a company. They've been funding local campaigns, judges, commissioners, clerks, all tied to the land office. Amara pressed a hand to her forehead. How far back? Some of the money trails go back to the 80s. Her chest tightened. That matched Isaiah's research. She turned away from the window. Micah, I need a secure copy of whatever you have. Something physical, not just emails. I'll deliver it myself, he said. Too risky otherwise. That same afternoon, Camille Rivers, a young public defender at the courthouse, waited near the basement copy room, a flash drive hidden in her jacket. She was nervous. Her job was already hard enough, underpaid, overworked, and surrounded by politics. But she had watched Judge Harlan's courtroom for years, watched him assign harsh sentences to black defendants, watched him ignore missing evidence, watched him bend the law for people with money, and now, finally, someone was challenging him. When she spotted Amara walking down the hallway, Camille fell into step beside her, slipping the flash drive into Amara's palm like it was nothing. 6 months of courtroom security footage, she whispered. I marked the timestamps. Watch for bailiff instructions and late-night office visits. Amara gave her a sideways glance. Why are you doing this? Camille looked forward, her jaw tight. Because last year, my client got 15 years for something a white kid got probation for. Same courtroom, same judge. I've been collecting receipts ever since. Thank you, Amara said, meaning it. Just make it count. That evening, Elijah and Isaiah met Amara at her office. They watched the footage on Camille's flash drive. And there it was, plain as day. Judge Harlan, after hours, entering the evidence room with his clerk. No logging in, no paperwork, just quiet entry and quiet exit. Tampering, Isaiah whispered. And this, Amara said, pausing the footage, proves it wasn't just bias. It was intentional. Outside, the wind picked up. Another storm, moving in. But this one wasn't coming from the sky. Later that night, Amara left her office and walked to the parking lot. As she approached her car, her steps slowed. All 4 tires were flat. A folded note was tucked under her windshield wiper. Drop this, or he dies like the rest. She stood in the rain for a long moment, heart pounding. Then she took out her phone, took a photo of the note, and called the police. Whoever they were watching now, and they were scared. The next morning, Micah arrived early, looking tired and wired. He brought documents, old tax records, court transcripts, hidden property transfers. But as they talked, he revealed something else. I think someone's leaking our moves. What do you mean? I was tipped off about a private cemetery that was supposedly bulldozed last night by Brightwell, he said. When I got there, it was just an empty lot. Nothing had been touched. Whoever gave me the tip wanted to waste my time, or watch how I respond. Amara felt the weight of it all closing in. They had the truth. But now the other side knew they had it, and that made everything more dangerous. That evening, Elijah got a call he never expected. It was a young man, early 30s, polite but cautious. His voice cracked slightly as he introduced himself. My name is David, he said. My grandfather lost his land in Jefferson County in 1993. I think it was the same judge, same company. I just didn't know what it meant until now. Elijah listened carefully, then asked, Why call me? Because you didn't give up, and now people are paying attention. I want to help however I can. Elijah hung up the phone and sat in silence. It was beginning. Others were coming, forward. Whispers were becoming voices. Stories long buried were now breaking the surface. But danger was moving with them, step for step. The fight wasn't over. It had only just reached the part where people had to choose. Speak the truth, or stay safe. Amara gathered all the flash. Drives, printouts, sworn statements, and tucked them into a locked case. She looked at Elijah and Isaiah. We've got the matches, she said quietly. Isaiah nodded. Now let's light the fire. 3 days later, the hammer finally dropped. A heavy envelope from the State Bar Association landed on Amara Langston's desk. It came by certified courier. No explanation, no courtesy call. She opened it with steady hands. Inside, a formal notice of investigation. The claim? Professional misconduct, evidence tampering, bribery. Her law license, suspended immediately, pending review. The attached recording was edited together with terrifying precision, chopped and stitched from different conversations. In it, her voice was heard offering a deal to a court clerk in exchange for private documents. It was fake, clean, convincing, and deadly. When she looked up, her hands were still steady, but her world had shifted. Later that evening, news anchors called it a bombshell scandal. Footage of Amara being escorted out of her office played on loop. Words like corrupt, disgraced, and under investigation filled the headlines. Her name, once tied to justice, was now being dragged through the mud. Reporters waited outside her building, her inbox filled with withdrawn support letters. Organizations that had once promised to stand behind Elijah's case now backed away, afraid of being dragged into controversy. Inside the courthouse, construction markers quietly reappeared on Elijah's land. Police escorted Brightwell development crews to the property under the guise of inspection work. But the message was clear. With Amara out of the picture, nothing would stop them. That night, Elijah sat alone on his porch. He watched the yellow construction ribbons flap in the wind. All his life, he'd been told justice was slow, but coming. His father had believed it. His wife had hoped for it. But now, staring at the outlines of new development plans sketched across land that had held his family's blood for over a century, he wasn't so sure anymore. His phone rang. It was Amara. Her voice was calm, but tired. "They've frozen the emergency hearing." Elijah said nothing for a long moment, then, "Maybe it's time to let it go." Amara's breath caught. "Elijah." "They always win," he said. "My father died thinking he failed. My wife spent her last days worried about this land. Now you're risking everything for 3 acres. I can't ask you to keep fighting." "You didn't ask," she said quietly. "And it's not about 3 acres anymore." "Then what is it about?" he asked, voice cracking. Amara didn't answer right away. Then she said, "It's about memory, and not letting people erase it." Elijah closed his eyes. Even as his voice said, "Let it go," his spirit whispered something else. "Don't." Across town, Isaiah worked late, combing through digital files. He'd created a backup of everything: financial documents, Brightwell stockholder lists, land records. But even his systems weren't safe. His hard drive had been remotely wiped the night before, an anonymous program, military-grade encryption. Only. One folder remained, one that had been hidden deep in a private partition. Grandma letters. His late grandmother Ruby had scanned family letters into a digital format before she passed. Most were everyday things: shopping lists, holiday wishes, notes about the garden. But one file stood out: a letter addressed to Elijah from 1993. Inside it, she wrote, "If they ever come again, look under the old floorboards. You'll find the map." Isaiah blinked. He rushed to Elijah's house. Together, they pulled up loose floorboards in the hallway. And there it was, a weathered, hand-drawn survey map from the 1800s, showing original Carter family land holdings, over 200. Acres, not 3, 200. Elijah's hands shook. "We never even knew. My father thought we only had what we stood on." Amara's voice rang in his memory. "It's not about 3 acres anymore." She had been right. Meanwhile, Camille Rivers, the public defender, stood outside Amara's apartment. She looked both ways, then knocked. When Amara opened the door, Camille stepped inside and handed her a flash drive. "Courtroom cameras," she said. There's footage from 2 months ago, after hours. Judge Harland and the Brightwell lawyers. No reason for them to be in chambers at 10 p.m. Amara sat up straighter. Camille's eyes burned. He met them before Elijah's first hearing. That's not coincidence. That's collusion. And why give this to me? Amara asked. Camille took a breath. Because I'm tired of defending people in a broken system. If I can't fix it from the inside, I'll burn it down from the outside. Later that week, Micah Reed was arrested. At 2 a.m., police arrived at his apartment with a search warrant, claiming he had illegally accessed confidential government databases. He hadn't, but someone had fabricated server logs to make it look like he had. While being processed at the station, Micah was surprised to see Camille waiting for him in the interview room. "I'm not your attorney," she said. "But Amara sent me. Don't say a word. They want you to incriminate yourself. Say nothing." Micah nodded. Outside, Amara called every contact she had. Her voice was tired but fierce. "They're trying to break us," she told Elijah and Isaiah. "But you only push this hard when you're scared." Elijah looked toward the land. The trees swayed in the distance. Somewhere near the old cemetery, a survey crew had placed another ribbon. "What now?" he asked. Amara's answer came steady. "Now, we stop playing by their rules." The next morning, a plain white envelope appeared under Amara's door. No, return address, no note. Inside was a photograph of a confession, handwritten by Judge Harlan's father in 1987, just before his death. It admitted to falsifying court records and stealing the Carter land during the 1963 case. Instructions had been given to his son. Make it right when the time comes. But the judge never had, until now. Someone, maybe his daughter, maybe his clerk, maybe someone unknown, had decided it was time. Amara held the photo in shaking hands. "This is it," she whispered. The truth had survived, and now it would be heard. It was still dark when Elijah Carter put on his navy blue suit. He buttoned it slowly, his fingers stiff from arthritis. The suit had been tailored just for today, and it fit perfectly. Unlike the faded one he had worn when the judge first laughed at him, this one carried a different weight, a quieter power. Outside his window, he could already hear the distant hum of engines, news vans, supporters, maybe even protesters. But Elijah just took a breath and sat for a moment, listening to the morning. He could hear the wind in the trees, the creak of the old porch, the same sounds his great-grandfather once heard, long before roads were paved or cameras flashed. Today wasn't just about him, it was about all of them. By 8 a.m., the federal courthouse steps were packed. Hundreds had gathered. Signs read, "Justice for the land," "This soil remembers," and "We are still here." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with a kind of tension no one could describe. Every seat was filled. Even standing room had people shoulder to shoulder. Lawyers, students, elders, reporters, and families who had lost land just like Elijah's. At the front sat Judge Marianne Taylor, a no-nonsense federal judge brought in from D.C. She looked over the packed courtroom and said plainly, "This case is no longer just about land. It is about trust, truth, and whether this court and this country can admit when it gets things wrong." Amara stood first. Her voice was clear, calm. But under every word, there was a quiet fire. "For years," she said, "this man," she nodded to Elijah, "was dismissed, ignored, and mocked for trying to protect land his family had, rightfully owned since 1867. But he was not wrong. He was not mistaken. He was silenced." Then she held up the photograph, the handwritten confession from 1987, signed by William Harland, father of the judge. This document proves the original theft and the chain of silence that followed. It was passed to Judge Theodore Harland, with instructions to make things right. Instead, he continued the theft, under a black robe and with a gavel in hand. Gasps echoed. On the defense bench, Judge Harland looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight. His shoulders sagged. His face was pale. The arrogance that once filled his voice was gone. Amara continued. We will show that this wasn't a mistake. It was a system. And it ends today. The next few hours were a wave of testimony. Isaiah presented digital evidence, mapping over 40 properties tied to Brightwell Development, all with ties to Harland's rulings. Micah, now released and exonerated, took the stand to share his findings. Donations, connections, timelines. All the dots connected. Then came Sarah, Harland's estranged daughter. She stood in silence for a long time before speaking. My father built a life by hiding truths, including me. The courtroom froze. I was raised out of sight. I learned early that some people get erased, but I will not erase myself anymore. I came here today to say that I am not ashamed of who I am, and I will not protect what he did. Then she looked directly at her father. You once told me certain people weren't meant to own land like this. Well, I was one of those people. And now I'm standing here, helping give it back. The courtroom burst into murmurs. Finally, Elijah was called to testify. He rose slowly, walked to the stand without help, and when he sat down, the entire room went still. My name is Elijah Carter, he said. I was born on the land they tried to take. My father was born on that land. So was his. My wife Ruby is buried under the big oak tree on the hill. He paused. I never wanted a fight. I wanted peace. I wanted to live where my family lived, die where they died, and one day be buried beside them. A hush swept the room. They told me I didn't file things, right? That I didn't understand the law, but the law should start with the truth. And the truth is, we were here first. We built that land up, planted on it, bled on it, loved on it. He looked at Judge Taylor. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for justice, for what's right. And then, he was done. By the afternoon, Judge Harland's defense had all but collapsed. The final blow came when federal marshals delivered a warrant, right there in court, charging him with judicial misconduct, fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. As the marshals approached, Harland stood shaking. This court, he tried to say. This court, Judge Taylor cut him off. You dishonored it, and now it speaks without you. Harland was led out of the courtroom, his black robe folded over his arm. No handcuffs, but no pride either. The room stayed silent, until Judge Taylor turned to the room. This court restores ownership of the Willow Creek property to the Carter family immediately, and this ruling will be entered into public record, not just as a case closed, but as a wrong made right. Tears rolled down Elijah's face. He didn't wipe them, he just nodded, and the entire room stood for him. 2 weeks later, Elijah returned to the land. Survey tape had been removed. Construction stopped. The development signs were gone. In their place, a simple wooden sign that read Carter Land, EST. 1867, reclaimed 2025. Isaiah walked beside him, holding a rolled-up map. Amara followed behind, smiling quietly. At the family cemetery, Elijah knelt beside Ruby's grave and placed fresh flowers down. We did it, he whispered. You were right all along. Truth outlives everything. Then he stood under the big oak tree and looked at the field where kids now played, where neighbors gathered, where stories once buried had returned to life. Amara joined him. There's more land, she said softly. More cases. What happened? Here is happening in other places too. Elijah looked toward the horizon. Then we keep going, he said. She smiled. That's the plan. A month later, Elijah Carter stood in front of a packed auditorium in Washington, D.C. He accepted the first Congressional Medal of Civil Valor ever awarded for defending generational land. "I'm not special," he said. "I'm just proof that old roots run deep, and when you water them with truth, they grow back stronger." And so, the story of one man's land became a story about a nation's history. A man with a briefcase full of memories took on a system built to forget him, and won. Not because the odds were fair, but because the truth refused to stay buried. And the soil? The soil remembered.